When you look at a traditional anatomical chart in a doctor's office, it's incredibly mechanical.
Right, yeah, it really is.
You see the muscles stripped back, and the bones are stacked up like scaffolding, and the veins are depicted like this color-coded plumbing system.
Exactly, like red for arteries,
Mhm.
blue for veins.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
basically an engine. And the underlying assumption there is that if you put fuel in, the gears turn. And if a part breaks, you just swap it out or patch it up.
And that Newtonian kind of mechanistic view of the body has been the absolute bedrock of Western medicine for centuries now,
Right.
because it gives us this illusion of absolute solid control. You can point to a localized spot on that chart and declare, there is the physical problem.
And it's comforting. I mean, we like things we can point to.
Yeah.
But then you start looking into the cutting-edge physics of what actually makes up those solid bones in that fluid blood.
Yeah, that's where it gets really interesting.
Right. Because if you zoom in close enough, past the cells, past the molecules, past the atoms, suddenly that solid meat machine completely vanishes.
It just disappears.
Yeah. You're left staring into this void filled with invisible, vibrating fields of energy. The solid ground just completely drops out from under you.
You transition entirely from, mechanical engineering into the bizarre, totally non-local world of quantum mechanics.
Which is just a wild shift.
It is. The paradigm shifts from objects bumping into each other to interfering waves of probability.
Which makes you wonder, did the architects of traditional Chinese medicine somehow understand this, like 2,500 years ago?
That's the big question.
Because looking at the stack of sources we have for you today for this deep dive, we're looking at these modern biophysics papers side by side with foundational texts like translations of the Huangdi Neijing.
Which was compiled centuries before the advent of the microscope, I should add.
Right. And they aren't describing some magical, mythical mist when they talk about energy. They're basically describing quantum field theory.
Yeah, they really are.
They're describing a measurable bioelectric reality that interacts directly with the quantum vacuum of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And it dictates everything from cellular division to your mental health.
It requires a radical shift in perspective to even approach this material, honestly.
How so?
Well, we have to discard that Cartesian mind-body split that we've relied on for so long.
The idea that the mind is a ghost driving a meat suit.
Exactly. From the perspective of these integrated biophysical models, the human being is not a machine piloted by a separate mind. The human being is a single, unimaginably complex field of energy.
Wow.
Matter and energy are entirely interchangeable here. There is literally no hard boundary between the electrical impulse of a thought in your brain and the physical state of the cells in your liver.
Okay, so if that's the case, if we're entirely interchangeable with energy, then to understand how a physical body heals, we have to start way smaller than the body.
We have to start at the subatomic level.
Right. We have to figure out how energy exists in the universe in the first place. And the sources we're diving into today, these incredibly dense modern biophysics papers, they rely heavily on something called the formalism of second quantization.
Yeah, that's a heavy concept.
I really need you to break this down for me because just the phrase second quantization makes my brain hurt. What are we actually talking about here?
Okay, let's unpack the progression of how physics views reality. So classical physics treats an electromagnetic field like a continuous wave.
Like ripples spreading across the surface of a pond.
Exactly. But then first quantization came along and said, actually, energy isn't continuous. It comes in discrete, indivisible packets called quanta.
Okay.
So think of light as a stream of individual particles, like photons, rather than a continuous wave.
Okay, so first quantization turns the wave into, like, a stream of physical little bullets.
Right. But second quantization takes it a massive step further.
Yeah.
It states that the fundamental reality of the universe is not the particles themselves, but the underlying fields. The fields are the only things that truly exist everywhere.
So the bullets aren't the reality, the field is.
Yes. Under this formalism, what we perceive as empty space, which is the free electromagnetic field, is not a void at all.
Okay, what is it then?
It is mathematically equivalent to an infinite collection of independent quantum harmonic oscillators.
Wait, back up.
Sure.
How does empty space vibrate if there is physically nothing there to do the vibrating?
That is the core mind bender of quantum field theory right there. The space itself has properties.
Yeah.
Imagine a perfectly still, perfectly flat ocean. It looks empty, but the medium of water is there, holding the potential for movement.
I'm with you.
A quantum harmonic oscillator is essentially a mathematical description of a system that oscillates around an equilibrium point. Think of an invisible pendulum.
An invisible pendulum. Okay.
Now imagine an infinite number of these pendulums filling every microscopic point in space, each capable of vibrating at a specific frequency and polarization.
So if the empty space is just an infinite sea of invisible pendulums, what is a physical particle? Like, what's an electron in this model?
An electron is just what happens when one of those specific pendulums gets pushed and starts swinging.
Really?
Yeah, it's a localized excitation of the underlying field. The field is the ocean, and the particle is just a temporary wave peaking on the surface.
I'm picturing this like an infinitely massive, completely silent orchestra.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
You have every conceivable instrument tuned to every conceivable frequency, taking up all the space. And when the room is perfectly quiet, the instruments are still there, humming with absolute potential energy.
That's the vacuum state. Yeah.
And particles aren't solid little billiard balls. They're just the temporary notes being played by those instruments.
Exactly.
When an oscillator gets excited, a note rings out. That note is a photon. That note is an electron.
That captures the dynamic nature of it perfectly. The vacuum is a structured, omnipresent medium constantly interacting with matter. And this purely mathematical, quantum mechanical description maps astonishingly well onto the foundational texts of traditional Chinese medicine.
This is where it gets crazy.
From a TCM perspective, those temporary notes, specifically photons, which are the quanta of light and electromagnetic energy, they represent a tangible physical counterpart to the concept of qi.
This is where the bridge gets built. So qi isn't just, life force in some vague spiritual sense.
Not at all.
The biophysics papers explicitly link the ancient concept of qi to photons and their quantized interactions with physical matter.
Look at how light interacts with matter on a subatomic level. It happens through very specific cycles.
Okay.
An atom can absorb an incoming photon. When it does, the energy of that photon excites the atom's electrons, bumping them into a higher, less stable orbit.
It drinks the energy.
It absorbs the note from the orchestra, and then later, that atom will spontaneously emit a photon, dropping its electron back down to a lower resting energy state.
Right.
Alternatively, it can be stimulated to emit a photon by an incoming wave that matches its frequency. These cycles, spontaneous and stimulated absorption and emission of photons, are the fundamental mechanisms of energy exchange in the universe.
And according to the unified model we're reviewing, those exact cycles map precisely onto the ancient medical descriptions of the body receiving, transforming, and emitting qi.
They map perfectly.
When the Huangdi Neijing talks about the body absorbing qi from the heavens and the earth and transforming it within the organ systems, they are describing the continuous exchange of electromagnetic energy and biophotons between human cellular biology and the surrounding environment.
They are describing the human organism as an open thermodynamic system.
Wow.
The microcosm of the body is physically trading subatomic energy with the macrocosm of the universal quantum field, but the parallels go much deeper than just energy exchange.
How much deeper?
The papers map the Taoist cosmogonic principles, which is their foundational origin story of the universe, directly onto particle physics.
I have to admit, when I first read this section of the research, I was a little skeptical.
It sounds like a stretch at first.
Yeah, because they talk about Wuji, which ancient philosophy describes as the primordial supreme vacuum that generates everything but is not yet manifest. It has no poles, no limits.
Right. Wuji literally translates to without limits or without pole. It is a state of absolute potential and complete stillness, yet pregnant with the possibility of everything.
Which sounds exactly like the quantum vacuum state before any particles are excited.
Yeah,
The silent orchestra.
exactly.
But then Wuji gives rise to Taiji, the origin of all manifest things, which is characterized by complementary dynamic duality, yin and yang.
The duality is key.
Right. And the papers take this philosophical concept and equate earth the yin, which is heavy, dark, and cloudy with the proton, and heaven the yang, which is light, clear, and luminous with the electron.
And that maps physically. The proton provides the dense, heavy, positive mass of the atomic nucleus. The electron provides the light, highly mobile negative charge that dances around the periphery.
Okay, here is where I need to play devil's advocate for you listening at home.
Go for it.
Is it a stretch to take ancient philosophy and say, oh, they obviously meant protons and electrons? I mean, the authors of these ancient medical texts didn't have particle accelerators.
No, they certainly didn't.
So aren't we just reverse engineering their poetry to fit modern science to make it sound credible?
That is a very critical distinction to make. No serious researcher is claiming the ancient Chinese possess an intuitive grasp of the standard model of particle physics.
Okay, good.
What they possessed was thousands of years of acute, systematic, empirical observation of natural phenomena. They recognize that the macroscopic universe operates on fundamental laws of opposing but complementary forces.
Right.
You cannot have a day without a night. You cannot have structural solidity without dynamic movement.
They observed that the Earth is dense and provides a foundation, while the sky is expansive and full of weather.
And what modern physics has done is mathematically prove that this exact same dynamic duality exists at the absolute foundational layer of physical reality.
Ah, I see.
The interaction between the heavy, stable center, the proton, and the dynamic, reactive periphery, the electron, is what allows chemistry to exist. The ancient Taoists weren't describing protons and electrons specifically.
They were describing the principles.
Right, they were describing the universal operating system that governs protons and electrons. They intuited the fractal nature of the universe, that the macro patterns are perfectly mirrored at the micro scale.
Okay, that makes total sense. It's not about them knowing the specific particles. It's about them recognizing the universal laws of polarity.
Exactly.
And speaking of the microscale, the biophysics paper introduces a concept called phononic tunneling that completely shattered my understanding of how biology works.
It's a huge concept.
The hypothesis here is that the quantum vacuum isn't just a passive background. It acts as an energetic and informational substrate in our actual biology.
This is the absolute bleeding edge of quantum biology. We normally think of biology as purely classical.
Right.
We picture molecules acting like tinker toys, just bumping into each other in a warm, wet cellular environment until they physically click together in the right chemical reaction.
It's all just random mechanical collisions.
But the math suggests that random collisions aren't efficient enough to explain the speed and precision of biological life. The hypothesis presented here involves phonons.
Okay, what is a phonon?
A phonon is a quantized unit of vibrational energy. Imagine a sound wave or a heat vibration moving through a crystal lattice. A phonon is the discrete packet of that vibrational energy.
So if a photon is a packet of light, a phonon is a packet of mechanical vibrations.
Spot on. And these phonons in biological systems have energy levels very close to that of ATP, which is the fundamental chemical energy currency of our cell.
Right, the energy molecules.
The model suggests that these specific phonons, originating from fluctuations in the quantum vacuum, induce something called quantum tunneling.
Okay, I need a physical, visual explanation of quantum tunneling. What is a particle actually doing when it tunnels?
In classical physics, if a particle doesn't have enough kinetic energy to get over an energy barrier, it bounces back. If you throw a tennis ball at a brick wall, it doesn't matter how many times you throw it. If you don't throw it hard enough to break the wall, it bounces back.
Makes sense.
But quantum mechanics says particles are also probability waves. There is a non-zero probability that the particle exists on the other side of the wall.
Which is so weird.
It is. In quantum tunneling, the particle essentially borrows energy from the vacuum, passes completely through the barrier, and materializes on the other side without ever having the classical energy to get over it.
That's why the tennis ball analogy always confused me, because tennis balls just don't do that.
No, they don't.
It sounds more like a glitch in a video game. Imagine playing a game where your character is trapped in a room. Classical physics says you have to find a key, open the door, and walk out.
Right.
But sometimes there's a glitch in the game's code. For one single frame, the coordinate system shifts, and your character simply phases through the solid wall and appears on the other side, completely bypassing the physical barrier because the underlying code allowed an overlap.
That is an incredibly accurate way to visualize it. The code in this case is the probability wave, and the glitch is quantum tunneling.
Okay, wow.
Now, apply this to genetic translation. The papers propose that this tunneling is happening between codonic states. A codon is a sequence of 3 DNA or RNA nucleotides that corresponds to a specific amino acid.
Okay.
When your body's building proteins, it has to translate this code incredibly fast and with near-perfect accuracy.
And the paper mentions this process is modeled under complex mathematical symmetries known as SU2 and SU3. What does abstract math have to do with my DNA building proteins?
Well, SU2 and SU3 are special unitary groups. They are mathematical frameworks used in quantum mechanics to describe symmetries, things like the spin of a particle or the color charge of quarks.
That sounds incredibly complicated.
It is, but the hypothesis is that the geometric alignment and chemical bonding of these codons aren't just relying on physical bumping, they are governed by these deep mathematical symmetries.
I see.
The phonon, the vibration from the vacuum, provides the exact resonance needed to allow the genetic molecules to tunnel through energy barriers, instantly snapping into the correct functional state.
Wait, you're saying that the process by which the information in my DNA is translated into the physical flesh of my body isn't just a series of lucky biochemical collisions.
Exactly.
It's a highly structured process guided by the quantum vibrations of empty space. The universe provides the exact right vibrational push to allow my genetic code to teleport into its proper shape.
Yes. It implies that our genetic blueprint is constantly reading and reacting to the quantum field.
That is profound, but it leads to a massive question.
Lock that.
If the vacuum of space is a buzzing field of harmonic oscillators, and DNA is utilizing quantum tunneling to fold proteins, how does that raw subatomic vibration coalesce into a macroscopic beating heart or a functioning liver?
That is the big jump.
Where is the bridge between the physics of the vacuum and human anatomy?
That brings us to the concept of the human biofield, or HBFD. If the universe is an infinite quantum field, the human body is a localized, highly dense, and organized expression of that field.
Okay.
The traditional texts explicitly state that the qi circulating in our bodies behaves as bioelectricity, and that our body is a living electromagnetic field.
For decades, Western medicine has looked at health almost exclusively through the lens of biochemistry. We look for chemical imbalances and we prescribe chemical compounds to fix them.
Right, pharmacology.
But this research elevates bioelectricity to the same fundamental level.
Biochemistry and bioelectricity are really two sides of the same coin. Every single cell in your body maintains an electrical charge across its membrane.
Yeah, that's true.
The firing of your neurons is an electrical event. The rhythm of your heart is an electrical event. The human biofield is the complex, dynamic, aggregated electromagnetic field generated by all of these trillions of localized cellular processes happening simultaneously.
And we aren't just speaking abstractly here.
Yeah.
The sources detail the specific physical cellular generators of this biofield. Let's look at the organelles.
Good place to start.
First up, we have the mitochondria. We all learned in high school biology that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It creates ATP.
Yes, through the electron transport chain, mitochondria are constantly shuttling electrons to create chemical energy. But crucially, as they engage in this furious oxidative metabolism, they also generate biophotons.
Biophotons.
These are ultra-weak light emissions.
Wait, my cells are emitting actual light.
Literally glowing in the dark.
Wow.
It's incredibly faint, requiring highly sensitive photomultipliers to detect, but it is real, measurable light. And it's not just a byproduct, it's a communication mechanism. Cells use these biophotons to signal each other across distances that chemical diffusion couldn't possibly cover in time.
And how do those light signals travel through the dense soup of a cell? The paper suggests they use the microtubules.
Yes, the microtubule.
Microtubules are the structural scaffolding of the cells, the cytoskeleton. But they do more than just hold the cell's shape. The research suggests they operate with optical conduction.
Consider the physical structure of a microtubule. It is a hollow cylinder made of a protein called tubulin. Inside that hollow tube is water.
Okay.
But it's not normal bulk water. Because of the confined space and the electromagnetic properties of the tubulin, the water molecules align into a highly ordered crystalline state.
Like ice, but not frozen.
Exactly. It's structured water. And this ordered environment turns the microtubule into a biological fiber optic cable.
That is wild.
The biophotons generated by the mitochondria can enter the microtubule and bounce down its length with near-perfect efficiency, conducting signals across the cell at the speed of light.
So we have mitochondria generating the power and the light, and microtubules acting as the fiber optic cables. And then we have DNA.
Right, the DNA.
The paper describes DNA and chromatin as elements of resonance and storage of biological information.
Look at the shape of DNA. The double helix is a coiled coil. In electrical engineering, a coil is an inductor, and a coiled coil is an incredibly efficient antenna.
Oh, wow.
DNA is physically structured to act as a fractal antenna, capable of receiving and transmitting a wide range of electromagnetic frequencies.
So the biofield isn't just an aura floating around.
No, it is actively interacting with the DNA antenna, potentially altering gene expression based on the electrical environment.
This brings a foundational maxim of TCM into incredibly sharp literal focus. There's a saying, where qi goes, blood follows.
A very famous saying.
For a long time, Western science might have viewed that as a quaint metaphor for circulation. But biologically, according to this model, it is a statement of physical law.
It comes down to the electrical properties of blood. Every red blood cell in your body possesses something called a zeta potential.
A zeta potential.
Yeah. Because of the specific glycoproteins on their surface, red blood cells carry a net negative charge.
Which is why they repel each other in the bloodstream, so they don't clump up and cause a clot. Right?
Correct. But because they carry this charge, each red blood cell acts as a dipole, essentially a microscopic battery. They store bioelectricity and can release it.
Okay.
Now consider the biological process of healing. If you cut your finger, the tissue needs to repair itself through mitosis, which is cellular division.
The cell has to copy its DNA and literally rip itself in half to create a new cell.
And physically pulling chromosomes apart during mitosis requires a massive influx of bioelectrical energy. It requires localized voltage.
Oh, I see where this is going.
So if an area of your body needs to heal, it demands an influx of bioelectricity. It needs qi. And to transport that large amount of electrical charge to the specific site, the body sends more dipole batteries, red blood cells, to the area.
The localized bioelectric demand dictates the vascular response.
Therefore, where the qi is needed, the blood must follow.
It's stunning how the ancient language maps perfectly to the hemodynamics. So we've established the cellular components, antennas, fiber optics, and microscopic batteries.
Right.
But traditional Chinese medicine doesn't just look at a soup of individual cells. It has an entirely unique anatomical map of how this energy flows through the macroscopic organ systems.
Yes, a very intricate map.
Looking at the essentials of Chinese acupuncture source, they categorize the organs not just by physical location, but by their bioelectric function. They divide them into yin and yang categories.
They start with the 5 Zhang organs, which are categorized as yin. They are the heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys.
Okay.
Anatomically, these are solid, dense organs. Their primary function in the TCM model is to manufacture, regulate, and most importantly, store qi and vital essence. They are the dense reservoirs of potential bioelectricity.
And paired with them are the fu organs, which are yang. These are the small intestine, gallbladder, stomach, large intestine, urinary bladder, and the sanjiao, or triple burner.
Right.
Unlike the Denzang organs, these are anatomically hollow. Their job is not to store, but to receive, break down, and transmit materials and waste. They're the active kinetic processing centers.
Notice how the macroscopic anatomy reflects the quantum physics we discussed earlier.
Oh, wow.
The dynamic between the solid, storing Zhang organs and the hollow, transmitting Fu organs is a direct biological reflection of the yin-yang duality.
The proton and the electron.
Exactly, the dense center and the active periphery.
But these organs don't exist in isolation. They are connected by a vast network, the electrical grid of the body. The texts detail the 14 main channels, or meridians, that map the body's surface and dive deep into the organs.
The meridian system.
Yeah, you have the lung channel of Han Tian running down the arm, or the stomach channel of Foot Yang Ming running down the leg. When I first learned about acupuncture, I assumed these were just imaginary lines. What are they physically?
Decades of biophysical research, particularly involving electrical skin resistance, have shown that acupuncture meridians correspond to pathways of lower electrical resistance in the connective tissue.
So they're actual pathways.
Yes. When an acupuncturist places a needle at a specific point on the stomach channel, they are not randomly piercing the skin. The needle, which is metallic and conductive, is being inserted into a specific node on a highly structured bioelectric circuit to alter the flow of current to the stomach and its related physiological systems.
And deeper than those 14 surface channels are the 8 extraordinary vessels. The sources describe these as the absolute deepest reservoirs of energy.
The foundation.
You have the Dumai, the governing vessel running up the spine, and the Renmai, the conception vessel running up the front of the torso. And both of these arise from a central core called the Changmai.
The Changmai is often translated as the penetrating vessel. In TCM embryology, it is the very first energetic vessel to form in the developing embryo.
Wow, the first one.
Think back to the quantum cosmogony we discussed. The Changmai represents the Wuji, the primordial singular origin point of the human body's energy system before differentiation.
Okay.
From that singular central axis, the duality of the Dumai, the Yang, and Renmai, the Yin, emerge, creating the Taiji of the human form. The ancient doctors observed the genesis of the universe mirrored in the embryological development of our bioelectric field.
It's beautiful, but it's also highly functional. And that functionality is governed by another core concept, the five elements. TCM doesn't just divide things into yin and yang, it further categorizes human physiology into wood, fire, earth, metal, and water.
The 5 phases, yeah.
The text explains that these elements have inter-promoting relationships. For instance, wood promotes fire. In the body, the liver is wood and the heart is fire. So the liver promotes the heart.
To a Western medical mind, that might sound like nonsense. Why does a detoxifying organ promote a pumping organ?
Exactly.
But if we look at it through the lens of systems biology and bioenergetics, it is incredibly accurate.
Break that down for me. What is the physical mechanism of the liver promoting the heart?
The heart muscle requires an immense, continuous supply of energy to maintain its ceaseless beating. It cannot store its own energy efficiently.
Right.
The liver, however, is the body's primary metabolic factory. It converts glucose into glycogen and stores it. It regulates the steady release of that fuel into the bloodstream.
Ah, I see.
If the liver fails to regulate blood sugar properly, the heart muscle eventually starves or goes into arrhythmia. The wood literally provides the continuous combustible fuel for the heart, the fire. It is an energetic cascade.
That makes total sense.
Okay.
But here is a major point of friction for people trying to understand TCM. Western medicine views the spleen as a relatively minor immune organ.
It does.
It filters old blood cells. You can have your spleen surgically removed and live a relatively normal life. But TCM pairs the spleen with the earth element, associates it with the mouth and digestion, and considers it one of the most vital Zhang organs. How can a system be so accurate about the liver and heart, but seemingly so wrong about the spleen?
This is perhaps the most common source of confusion, and it fundamentally stems from a translation error mixed with a paradigm clash.
A translation error.
When early European scholars translated Chinese medical texts, they looked for the closest physical organ to match the Chinese terms. They saw the Chinese character for pi and translated it as spleen. But in TCM, pi with a capital P does not just mean the fist-sized lymphatic organ tucked under your rib cage.
It's a functional system, not just a chunk of meat.
Exactly. The spleen system in TCM encompasses the entire physiological and bioelectric process of digestion and assimilation. It includes the transformation of food into usable bioenergy, the extraction of nutrients in the small intestine, and the role of the pancreas in secreting digestive enzymes and insulin. It is categorized as the earth element because it is the central processing hub that transforms raw, external material into the vital energy that sustains the entire body.
So when an acupuncturist tells you that your spleen is deficient, they aren't saying your literal spleen is diseased.
Not at all.
They are saying your body's bioelectric capacity to extract and assimilate energy from your food is compromised. Your earth system is failing to generate power.
Precisely. You have to read the anatomy functionally, not just structurally.
Okay, so we've mapped out the healthy circuit. We have the quantum vacuum feeding the cells acting as antennas and batteries, the organs acting as massive reservoirs and processors, all connected by a highly conductive electromagnetic grid.
That's the baseline of health.
Which leads us to the critical question for you listening. What happens when that circuit fails? If health is the smooth flow of this current, what physical mechanism causes illness?
If we understand health as the unimpeded circulation of bioelectricity, then illness must be understood as a disruption or blockage of that flow. The sources from Dr. Yang, Zhuang Ming, provide a rigorous, physics-based explanation of this.
What does he say?
He translates the abstract concepts of yin and yang imbalances directly into the language of electrical circuits, specifically focusing on electromotive force, or EMF.
In standard electrical circuit, EMF is the voltage. It's the pressure that physically pushes the electrons through the wire.
Right. If there is no EMF, the electrical potential is equal everywhere, and the current stagnates. The human body generates its own internal EMF through the pumping of the heart, the firing of the nervous system, and the chemical gradients of the cells.
Okay.
The major causes of illness, according to this bioelectric model, are radical fluctuations in this internal EMF.
Dr. Yang explains that when the EMF generated in the body is too strong, the current circulating is too strong, the voltage is too high. This causes the body to become excessively yang.
Yes.
In TCM diagnostics, this manifests as a heat syndrome.
Think about a wire carrying too much current. It physically heats up. In the body, an overloaded circuit manifests as acute inflammation, a rapid and bounding pulse, high fever, flushed skin, or manic hyperactive behavior. The system is overstimulated.
And conversely, when the internal EMS is too weak, the current barely flows. The body becomes excessively yin. This is a cold syndrome. The circuit is underpowered.
The symptoms follow the physics. Lethargy, poor peripheral circulation causing cold hands and feet, chronic fatigue, a slow and weak pulse, and a depressed immune response.
That makes a lot of sense.
The treatment strategy isn't necessarily to attack the symptom directly, but to regulate the bioelectric pressure, to either vent the excess voltage or stimulate the generators to boost the weak current.
But it's not just internal factors affecting this voltage. The biophysical papers bring in a massive, unavoidable external factor. The geomagnetic field of the Earth, the GMFD.
This is a really crucial point.
Our planet is a giant magnet, and its field is constantly fluctuating due to solar winds, solar flares, and celestial mechanics. And the human biofield is not insulated from this.
This is where the integration of these models becomes truly awe-inspiring. Research demonstrates that the Earth's geomagnetic field synchronizes directly with the human autonomic nervous system and cardiovascular rhythms.
Wow.
And we know the physical mechanism for this. We have biogenic magnetite crystals embedded in our brains, particularly in the meninges.
Magnetite is a highly magnetic mineral. How does a crystal in my brain affect my nervous system? The paper says it acts as a transducer. Break that down for me.
Think about how a basic microphone works. A microphone is a transducer. It takes the physical mechanical wave of my voice traveling through the air and translates it into an electrical signal moving down a wire.
Right.
The biogenic magnetite in your brain acts the same way, but for magnetic fields. When a solar storm hits the Earth and the local geomagnetic field wildly fluctuates, those microscopic magnetite crystals physically vibrate or change alignment.
Oh, wow.
This mechanical stress is converted into an electrical signal that directly impacts the surrounding neural tissue.
So a solar flare 93 million miles away physically alters the firing rate of my nervous system through tiny magnets in my head. That is wild.
It is deeply interconnected. Now, the paper notes that in TCM, environmental factors like extreme weather or pathogens are categorized as Shi-Qi or evil He,
Okay.
but the fluctuating geomagnetic field itself isn't usually the pathogen. Instead, it acts as a stressor and a facilitator.
It weakens the shields.
Exactly. Every person has an internal bioelectric resistance, their immune integrity, which TCM calls Zheng Qi or righteous Qi. When the GMFD undergoes severe fluctuations, it induces stress on your internal biofield.
I see.
If your Zheng Qi is already weak from poor diet or lack of sleep, this sudden geomagnetic stress compromises your defenses entirely.
And that's when the external pathogens strike. The physical resistance of your cellular membranes drops, allowing the Shi-Qi, the virus, or the bacterial infection, to penetrate deeply into the system. It's a classic formula. Internal deficiency combined with external invasion. The gates are left unguarded because the power to the security system is fluctuating due to planetary weather.
It implies that our health is literally tied to the stars. But while we cannot control solar flares, we can control our internal resistance.
All right.
And the primary saboteur of that internal resistance isn't always a poor diet or an external virus. Most often, the most destructive force is generated entirely within the mind.
Which brings us to the concept of physical tension as a bioelectric blockage. I want to look at the sources on Qigong, specifically the Qigong Workbook for Anxiety.
Okay, let's look at that.
It introduces a profound premise. Illness is essentially a dam in the body's life stream, and the architect of that dam is mental tension.
The text defines tension very specifically. It is not just an emotional state, it is the subtle physical effect of mental strain on our muscles and nerves.
Right.
When you experience chronic stress, anxiety, or emotional trauma, your central nervous system triggers a low-grade fight-or-flight response.
Next time you're sitting in traffic, late for a meeting, pay attention to your body. You aren't just annoyed in your head. You are physically clenching your jaw. Your shoulders are hiked up to your ears.
You're bracing for impact.
Your breathing becomes shallow and restricted in your chest. We all do this unconsciously.
And from a bioelectric standpoint, that unconscious physical contraction is a literal mechanical resistance placed on the electrical wires of your body. You are physically pinching the meridians and the nerve pathways.
You're squeezing the hose.
Exactly. So the current cannot flow smoothly. The energy pulls up on one side of the muscular blockage, creating an excess, a localized yang heat.
Right.
Meanwhile, the tissues on the other side of the blockage are starved of energy, creating a yin deficiency.
The workbook uses an evocative and accurate phrase. Like stagnant water, energy putrefies.
That's a great image.
The tissues that are starved of bioelectricity cannot undergo mitosis properly. The cells don't get the voltage they need to repair themselves. Inflammation sets in. cellular communication breaks down, and disease takes root.
But then we have the solution. Qigong, the deliberate mindful movement, breath work, and mental focus designed to clear these blockages.
I was thinking about how to explain what Qigong actually does physically, and I came up with an analogy based on the Essential Qigong Training Guide.
Let's explore that.
Think of your body's energy system like a computer network. The living cells hold the electric charge, and the nervous system is the wiring passing the data.
Okay.
Over time, through chronic stress, poor diet, and unhealed emotional trauma, we download incompatible programs into our hardware. Our electrical signals become fragmented. We have dozens of background processes running, anxiety about the future, regret about the past, eating up our RAM.
That's a very modern way to put it. I like it.
Qigong is essentially a deep-level computer repair utility. You boot it up and it runs a diagnostic. Through slow, controlled movement, it optimizes the fragmented energy data.
Yeah.
It forces you to close the incompatible background programs of chronic stress, and it slowly mends the frayed physical wiring of the nervous system by releasing the muscular clamps.
That analogy works because it highlights the active, conscious nature of the repair. The text quotes Qigong master Hong Lu, who offers a more traditional but equally powerful analogy.
What does he say?
He says, imagine you have a rope with a tight knot tied in the middle of it. If you take that knotted rope to a Western surgeon, their approach is mechanical. They cut the knot out entirely and splice the two ends of the rope back together.
The problem is technically solved. The blockage is gone.
But the rope is now permanently shorter. There is a seam, a scar, where the integrity of the original structure has been compromised.
Right.
But if you take that same knotted rope to a Qigong master, they don't cut it. They sit down and meticulously, patiently begin to untie the knot thread by thread.
Wow.
Qigong practice slowly unravels the muscular and nervous tension, dissolving the dam until the rope is completely smooth and restored to its original length, strength, and conductivity.
It's a preventative restorative maintenance program for your bioelectric grid. And that leads us to the final layer of this deep dive, the psychological interface.
Yes, the mind.
Because if physical tension creates these blockages, how does the deliberate manipulation of this energy, the slow untying of the knot, feed back into our psychology and our mental health? We have a fascinating clinical paper to look at here. The neurophysiological and psychological mechanisms of Qigong as a treatment for depression, a systematic review and meta-analysis.
This paper is crucial because it moves the conversation from theoretical physics and ancient philosophy into rigorous, peer-reviewed clinical data.
We're looking at actual studies now.
The researchers combed through existing randomized controlled trials to see if Qigong actually works as an antidepressive treatment, and more importantly, they wanted to understand the biological mechanism of how it works.
The meta-analysis found a statistically significant effect. Practicing Qigong was highly effective in alleviating symptoms of clinical depression.
Very effective.
But the key to understanding how RAHAM was found in the autonomic nervous system. The data showed that Qigong produced a significant reduction in diastolic blood pressure.
Let's look at the mechanism there. Diastolic blood pressure is the pressure in your arteries when your heart is resting between beats. It is one of the most reliable indicators of the baseline state of your autonomic nervous system.
Okay.
A significant drop in diastolic pressure indicates a profound shift away from the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, high stress, high tension state.
And it shifts you into the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state, the state where the body allocates resources to cellular repair, where the knot is untied.
Exactly. Qigong forces the body to switch biological gears. By intentionally slowing the breath to a specific rhythm, focusing the mind entirely on the present moment, and moving the body in relaxed, sweeping arcs, you are sending a massive, undeniable bioelectric signal to your brainstem that you are safe.
That you're okay.
The brain responds by forcibly downregulating the systemic stress response, lowering the vascular pressure, and allowing the bioelectric current to flow through the meridians without resistance.
But I want to highlight a really surprising detail from the data because it challenges the entire Western model of depression.
It really does.
The meta-analysis looked for the typical biochemical markers we associate with depression, but they found no significant effect on cortisol levels, which is the primary stress hormone.
Right.
And in studies that measured it, they found no significant difference in serotonin levels compared to the baseline. Yet despite serotonin and cortisol remaining relatively unchanged, the patient's depression scores still dropped significantly. How is that
That's a
possible?
huge finding.
If the Western medical model views depression purely as a chemical imbalance of serotonin, how does Qigong cure the depression without changing the serotonin?
That is the million-dollar question, and it's why this research is so disruptive to the standard pharmacological model. If you view the brain solely as a chemical soup, this data makes no sense.
Not at all.
But if you view the brain as a bioelectric control center, it becomes clear. The researchers analyze this and suggest that Qigong's mechanism isn't about flooding the brain with serotonin or forcibly halting cortisol production.
Okay.
Consider the physical reality of the patient. The body might still be producing cortisol because the external stressors of their life still exist.
Right. Doing Qigong for an hour doesn't magically fix a toxic workplace or cure a sick family member. The trigger for the stress is still present in their life.
Precisely. But what Qigong does is alter the autonomic nervous system's baseline. It modulates the stressful signals traveling from the limbic system, the emotional reactive center of the brain, to the HPA axis.
Let's define the HPA axis. That's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, right?
Yes.
It's the cascade that creates stress.
Right.
The hypothalamus senses danger, tells the pituitary gland to sound the alarm, which tells the adrenal glands to flood the body with cortisol.
Yes. And Qigong intercepts that signal. The alarm might still be ringing in the limbic system, but Qigong acts as a bioelectric dampener, turning down the volume on the receiver at the HPA axis.
Wow.
It bypasses the traditional pharmacological pathways. You don't necessarily need a drug to artificially boost serotonin if you can use bioelectric regulation to stop the nervous system from constantly violently reacting to the stress in the first place.
It changes the perception and the processing of the stress at an electrical level, rather than just masking the chemical output.
Exactly.
And this ties deeply into the psychological mechanisms the review discusses. When the central nervous system is brought into this state of profound parasympathetic relaxation through the smooth flow of qi, it alters consciousness.
The paper explicitly notes that Qigong increases self-efficacy and self-concept.
Think about what it feels like to be trapped in clinical anxiety or depression. You feel entirely at the mercy of your neurochemistry.
You feel helpless.
But when you spend an hour untying the physical knots in your body, and you literally feel your blood pressure drop, your heart rate slow, and your mind clear, you have a realization.
What is that realization?
You are not a passive victim of your biology. You realize you have the internal mechanical tools to regulate your own nervous system.
Yeah.
That realization alone is a massive transformative boost to your self-efficacy.
It is the psychological empowerment that comes from reclaiming conscious control over your own biofield. You learn experientially that your focused mind can direct your qi, and your smoothly flowing qi can heal your body.
Yes.
It creates a positive feedback loop that directly counteracts the downward spiral of depression.
There is one more physiological detail from the sources that I found incredibly poignant, and it connects all this dense clinical data back to the lived human experience of the practice.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
The Idiot's Guide to Tai Chi and Qigong mentions a phenomenon that happens during sitting Qigong, which utilizes progressive muscular relaxation. Practitioners often find themselves sitting there, completely relaxed and inexplicably wiping away tears.
Yeah.
They aren't consciously thinking of something sad, but they just start crying.
It's a widely documented phenomenon in deep somatic practices. When you finally stop clamping down on your nervous system, when you finally allow the bioelectric current to push through a muscular blockage that you may have been subconsciously holding onto for decades, the physical release is profound.
But it's not just a vague emotional release, it's a biochemical excretion. The text cites a discovery by the Tear Research Center.
This is fascinating.
They found that emotional tears, unlike the basal tears that just lubricate your eyes or the reflex tears you get from cutting an onion, actually contain high levels of stress chemicals that have built up in the body. Specifically, emotional tears contain ACTH.
ACTH is adrenocorticotropic hormone. It is a critical component of that HPA axis we just discussed. It is the specific hormone released by the pituitary gland that travels to the adrenal glands and commands them to produce cortisol. It is one of the body's most reliable biological indicators of severe stress.
Are you saying my tears are literal toxic waste dumps for stress hormones?
Let's connect the mechanisms. When you practice Qigong, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, sending a powerful signal of safety to the brain.
Okay.
The body realizes it no longer needs to maintain this high alert fight or flight state. It needs to rapidly downregulate. but the blood is still full of the ACTH that was driving the stress response.
It has to go somewhere.
It needs to get rid of the excess hormones that are causing the yang overload, the heat syndrome.
And one of the ways it physically rapidly excretes those hormones out of the bloodstream is through the lacrimal glands. Through crying. The tear is the physical, biological manifestation of the untied knot. It's the bioelectric dam finally breaking and the toxic chemical buildup being literally flushed out of the body. Crying during deep relaxation isn't a sign of emotional weakness. It is a highly efficient biological cleansing mechanism, venting an energetic blockage.
Yeah. It perfectly illustrates the total lack of separation between the mind, the body, and the energy field.
Let's look at that loop.
Look at the causal chain. A psychological trauma creates a subtle, conscious, or unconscious mental tension. That mental tension translates into a physical contraction in the muscle tissue and the nerve fascia.
Right.
That physical contraction creates a literal resistance in the bioelectric field, a blockage of qi. That electrical blockage alters the cellular biochemistry, leading to inflammation and disease.
And Qigong just reverses the loop.
Exactly. The deliberate physical relaxation allows the electrical energy to flow again. The restored bioelectric flow alters the biochemistry. The biochemistry flushes the accumulated stress hormone via a physical tear. And the release of that hormone physically relieves the psychological trauma. It is one continuous, unified biophysical loop.
It is completely breathtaking when you look at it from that unified perspective.
Mm-hmm.
We've covered an immense amount of ground today, from the subatomic to the psychological, and I want to try to summarize the scale of this incredible journey for you.
It's been quite a ride.
We started with a simple premise. What if the ancient concept of qi is a measurable physical reality? We've seen how this idea is not magic. It is a rigorous, observable phenomenon that scales across every single level of reality.
From the very small to the very large.
We started at the absolute bottom with the formalism of second quantization, exploring how the quantum vacuum is an infinite sea of harmonic oscillators. We saw how the exchange of photons, the localized excitations of that field, maps perfectly to the exchange of qi. And we explored the mind-bending hypothesis of phononic tunneling, where the vibrations of empty space allow our very DNA to bypass classical physics to build our bodies.
We then moved up the scale to biology and anatomy, seeing how our cells operate as dipole batteries and structural fiber optic networks, relying on the constant high-speed flow of bioelectricity to divide and function.
Exactly.
We saw how this microscopic flow is mapped perfectly by the ancient meridian system, and how the macroscopic organ systems reflect the universal laws of yin and yang, of dense storage and active transmission.
We saw how illness is fundamentally an electroanatomical problem, a localized blockage of electrical current caused by physical tension and mental strain, exacerbated by fluctuations in the geomagnetic field of the Earth itself acting upon the magnetite crystals in our brains.
And finally, we looked at the clinical proof. We saw how the intentional, mindful manipulation of this energy through Qigong physically alters the autonomic nervous system.
It drops the blood pressure.
It activates the parasympathetic response, lowers diastolic blood pressure, and provides a scientifically validated treatment for clinical depression that fundamentally bypasses traditional chemical pathways by modulating the body's electrical baseline.
It is a complete and total paradigm shift. It takes the mechanical, plumbing-based view of the human body that we started with, that chart on the doctor's wall, and replaces it with a dynamic, interconnected, quantum biological masterpiece.
We are not isolated meat machines.
No.
We are living, breathing electromagnetic fields, constantly exchanging information and energy, playing our unique part in the silent orchestra of the universe.
And that realization leaves us with one final, deeply provocative implication to ponder. If everything we've discussed today accurately describes reality,
And the science suggests it does.
if your human biofield is in constant quantum communication with the geomagnetic field of the Earth, absorbing and emitting photons with the universe around you, and if your internal emotional tension physically alters the cellular electricity that builds the boundaries of your body, then the boundary you perceive between your mind, your body, and your environment is completely porous. It's an illusion.
The solid ground drops out one last time.
So I leave you with this question to mull over next time you feel a knot of tension in your stomach or step outside into the sunlight. If your thoughts affect your biofield, and your biofield interacts continuously with the quantum vacuum that permeates all of space, where does you actually end and the universe begin?